Welcome to The Explainer. I'm really thrilled to have you here with us today. When we normally talk about personal finance, building wealth, or money in general, the conversation almost always steers right toward investing, compounding interest, and basically how to get richer. But today, we're flipping the script completely. We're going to look at a reality that is so often overlooked. For a lot of lower income households, the focus just isn't on investing for tomorrow, it's entirely on navigating the immediate, pressing financial challenges of today. And as we're going to uncover, just surviving day to day comes with a very surprising hidden price tag.
Okay, let's dive into this deeply counterintuitive question. Is it expensive to be poor? Now, at first glance, you might think, well, no, having limited means obviously just means you buy less stuff. But our source material today reveals something totally different. It challenges that basic assumption head on and shows us that a lack of money doesn't just limit your purchasing power, it actually changes the fundamental math of what everyday things cost. Which brings us to a really critical concept, the poverty premium. By definition, this is the extra cost lower-income households incur simply because they have less financial flexibility. I really want you to keep the idea of a financial buffer in the back of your mind throughout this explainer. It's really the core motif of our entire discussion. Because when you lack that buffer, you're structurally forced into situations where you end up paying significantly more for the exact same goods and services as someone who has savings. To truly grasp how this works in the real world, we're going to trace 8 specific hidden costs across 4 key areas: daily realities, the credit trap, borrowing from tomorrow, and finally, the flexibility factor.
Starting with number 1, daily realities, the invisible costs of just getting by. This is where we see exactly how the poverty premium silently and persistently drains budgets in the most everyday, mundane situations imaginable.
Let's consider the appliance trap. Say a household has a bit of savings. They can just pay up front for a brand new, highly energy-efficient fridge. But without that upfront cash, another family is forced to just keep running their old, failing fridge. Because they lack that financial flexibility, they end up paying higher electricity bills month after month, year after year. The inability to pay a lump sum right now directly results in a much higher long-term utility cost.
And we see a really similar, painful dynamic when it comes to commuting. It turns out affordable housing is often a bit of a mirage. While the rent might technically be lower further away from major work districts, that family is now spending significantly more on public transport. So not only are they paying higher transport fees, but they are literally draining precious hours away from work, family responsibilities, or honestly just getting enough rest. That cheaper rent is ultimately subsidized by a massive, heavy tax on their time and transit budget. Then there's the snowball effect of late payment charges. Imagine an unexpected expense pops up. Suddenly, several bills, utilities, mobile plans, maybe a credit card, might all have to be paid late at the same time. Each of these late fees might seem tiny on its own, but for a household operating on an incredibly tight monthly budget, they snowball so rapidly. And here's what's absolutely vital to understand here. This isn't about financial irresponsibility. It's simply a matter of not having enough cash available at the exact right time. And this brilliantly illustrates the relentless, everyday tax of living without a financial buffer. These 3 daily premiums, higher running costs, longer commutes, and snowballing late fees, they all chip away at an already limited budget. Let's move to part 2, the credit trap, paying more to access money. There is a deeply tragic irony embedded in our financial systems, and it's that those who can least afford high borrowing costs almost always end up paying the absolute highest price for credit. Just think about how the credit card market operates for a second. It's heavily built around rewards. Cashback, air miles, dining discounts, you name it. If you have a buffer and can pay your balance in full every month, you reap all these amazing benefits. But if you have a lower income and intentionally avoid these cards because the risk of carrying a balance is just too high, you miss out entirely. The system literally hands out discounts to people who already have money. And what happens when an essential item, like a washing machine, breaks down? Having savings allows for a quick, upfront cash replacement, but a lack of savings means relying on an interest-bearing installment plan. Depending on the rate, the final price tag for that exact same washing machine is going to be significantly higher. Installments effectively act as a penalty price for simply not having cash up front. But it gets even more difficult when actual cash loans are needed. Households with smaller financial buffers naturally have weaker credit profiles, fewer assets, and less established credit histories. Because of this, the cheaper mainstream bank options simply disappear. Obtaining a personal bank loan without sufficient income is nearly impossible, which pushes borrowers toward alternative options, like licensed moneylenders.
4%. That is the maximum legal monthly interest rate for licensed moneylenders in this context. While it's perfectly legal, a 4% rate per month makes borrowing vastly more expensive than the mainstream credit available to stronger borrowers. It is a staggering figure that highlights just how expensive it really is to access money when you don't already have it. When we break it all down, the divide in the credit trap is crystal clear. With card rebates, savings buy discounts, while a lack of savings means paying full price. For essentials, savings unlock the standard sticker price, while installment plans pile on interest. And for loans, savings unlock cheap bank rates, while a lack of savings pushes borrowers toward high-interest moneylenders. At every single turn, lacking a buffer is heavily, heavily penalized. Section 3. Borrowing from tomorrow, sacrificing the future for today. Honestly, this is arguably the most devastating theme we're covering. A tight monthly budget doesn't just affect today. It forces people to make decisions right now that severely compromise their future health and financial security. Let's move to healthcare and see how this builds step by painful step. First, because the monthly budget is stretched way too thin, a family postpones a routine dental checkup or a basic health screening. Second, an untreated condition, let's say it's just a small cavity, silently worsens over time. Third, that delayed treatment results in a massive, incredibly expensive medical bill for extensive work later on. Postponing preventative care might save a tiny bit of cash today, but it costs vastly more in the future. We see the exact same tragic trade-off with insurance. Health and life insurance premiums are heavily tied to your age and medical history when you apply. Applying when you're young and healthy secures low premiums, but for lower-income households, those premiums can feel entirely unaffordable in early adulthood. So, what happens? They delay coverage to save money in the short term, but waiting practically guarantees a much higher lifelong cost, leading to steeper premiums, exclusions for pre-existing conditions, or even struggling to get covered at all later in life. So, to recap these future poverty premiums, we're looking at inflated medical bills from delayed preventative care and permanently higher life and health insurance premiums. The absolute hardest part to swallow here is that even when spending money today could unequivocally save money later, the room in the current budget simply isn't there. Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, the flexibility factor. It's about the buffer, not the choices. After looking at these 8 financial traps, I really want to challenge you to completely rethink the root cause of these issues. So the crucial point is this. We are not necessarily looking at poor decision-making here. It is a sheer lack of financial flexibility. Telling someone to just make better financial decisions completely ignores the systemic reality of their situation. Think about it. When you have a buffer, you can afford to spend more upfront to save money later. When you lack that buffer, the cheaper long-term option is simply a luxury you cannot access. I actually want to read a quote directly from our source material today, because it just perfectly encapsulates everything we've explored. Sometimes, the more expensive option is not a bad choice. It is the only realistic one available. Let the gravity of that statement really sink in for a second. When you buy an appliance in installments or postpone a dental visit, it's not a failure of financial literacy. It's survival based on what is realistically possible in this month's budget. Which leaves us with a rather profound and challenging thought to end this explainer on. If our financial systems structurally penalize those without a buffer at almost every single turn, from utility bills to loan rates to healthcare, how can someone ever afford to break out of the poverty premium? It's a question that demands we look way beyond just personal finance tips and start seriously examining the structural nature of these costs. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this fascinating and critical topic today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.